In today's video, we're looking at these Karens who got eaten alive by deadly animals. From an educator who meets a protective alligator to a bargain hunter whose zoo visit ended in tragedy. These stories show how arrogance can have deadly consequences. It was March 18, 2023, when tragedy struck at a private exotic animal ranch nestled in the rolling hills near Wynwood, Oklahoma. The sprawling 200-acre facility, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire and warning signs, housed dozens of big cats in enclosures dotted with concrete shelters, elevated platforms, and artificial rock formations. The property had operated for over 15 years, catering to wealthy clients seeking exclusive encounters with exotic predators. Lisa Hartman, a 41-year-old interior decorator from Scottsdale, Arizona, had convinced her reluctant husband to book this premium tour during their weekend getaway. Known for her demanding personality, pushy negotiation tactics, and tendency to disregard inconvenient rules, Leslie had specifically requested access to areas typically restricted to the public. She had researched the facility extensively, discovering that additional fees could unlock behind-the-scenes experiences. The ranch owner, initially hesitant, but swayed by the substantial premium fees Leslie offered, agreed to provide a specialized guided experience through restricted sections. The Bengal tiger, a magnificent 400-pound male named Khan, represented one of nature's most formidable predators. These apex hunters possess bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, easily capable of crushing human skulls and snapping bones. Their muscular hindquarters generate explosive power, enabling leaps of up to 30 feet, while razor-sharp retractable claws extend up to 4 inches in length, designed for gripping and tearing flesh. Despite being hand-raised from a 6-week-old cub and spending 7 years in captivity, Khan retained every lethal instinct programmed by millions of years of evolution. His amber eyes could detect movement from hundreds of yards away, while acute hearing picked up imperceptible sounds. As the exclusive tour progressed through various enclosures, Leslie grew increasingly impatient, with safety protocols, viewing distances, and constant reminders about maintaining barriers. When they approached Khan's habitat, the guide explained this enclosure remained completely off-limits due to recent behavioral changes the tiger had exhibited, including increased territorial aggression and unpredictable responses to human presence. Leslie dismissed these warnings with characteristic arrogance, claiming she had observed big cats at facilities nationwide and understood their behavioral patterns better than casual visitors. While the guide answered questions from other participants, Leslie noticed the service gate along Khan's enclosure left slightly ajar by maintenance staff. Without hesitation, she slipped through the opening and strode confidently toward the center of the habitat. Khan, resting in the shade beneath a concrete shelter 50 yards away, immediately detected the unauthorized intrusion. His massive frame rose slightly as amber eyes locked onto the trespasser with predatory focus. The tiger's stalking instincts engaged as he began moving with calculated precision, each padded paw placed with absolute silence as he closed the distance. Leslie, oblivious to the approaching danger and convinced of her expertise, continued walking deeper into Khan's territory, her back turned to the advancing predator. Khan struck with lightning speed and devastating force. He launched his entire 400-pound body weight against Leslie's back, driving her face first into the hard-packed dirt with a bone-crushing impact. His powerful jaws immediately clamped down on her exposed neck with catastrophic force. 4-inch canine teeth puncturing straight into the carotid artery and crushing cervical vertebrae. As Leslie's body convulsed beneath the tiger's weight, Khan's razor-sharp claws raked repeatedly across her shoulders and upper back, tearing through clothing, skin, and muscle before scraping bone. Blood poured from multiple puncture wounds as the tiger's jaws maintained their death grip, completely severing major blood vessels and causing massive internal trauma. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but the damage proved immediately fatal. Ranch staff rushed to the scene with fire extinguishers and emergency equipment, managing to drive Khan back to his shelter. But Leslie had already succumbed to massive blood loss, spinal trauma, and catastrophic tissue damage. Emergency responders pronounced Leslie dead at the scene after confirming the absence of vital signs. State investigators determined Leslie had violated multiple safety protocols by entering the restricted area without authorization. The ranch faced intense public scrutiny from animal rights organizations, though officials concluded Leslie's deliberate actions directly caused the fatal encounter. Her family released a brief statement requesting privacy during their grief, while activists renewed calls for stricter oversight of private exotic animal facilities. It was May 2, 2022, when Cheryl Ann Braddock pulled her silver Honda Accord into the gravel parking area along Loop Road in Big Cypress National Preserve. The 67-year-old recently retired school principal had decided to spend her newfound freedom exploring the wild heart of the Everglades, something she'd promised herself for decades while managing unruly students in Naples. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sawgrass prairie, and the air hung thick with humidity and the earthy scent of decomposing vegetation. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss lined the dark canal that ran parallel to the road, their gnarled roots disappearing into water the color of black tea. Multiple yellow warning signs dotted the area, their bold letters proclaiming, "Danger alligators," in both English and Spanish. But Cheryl Ann barely glanced at them as she opened her car door and released her energetic Cocker Spaniel, Rusty. She had driven this route countless times during her teaching career, taking weekend trips to clear her mind from the stress of administrative duties. The American alligator is one of nature's most successful predators, having survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. These apex predators can grow up to 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with females typically reaching 8 to 10 feet. Their powerful jaws contain 74 to 80 razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping rather than chewing, capable of exerting bite forces exceeding 2,900 pounds per square inch. During nesting season from April through July, female alligators become extremely territorial and aggressive, defending their nests with lethal determination. They construct their nests from vegetation and mud near water sources, remaining vigilant guardians until their young hatch. These prehistoric survivors can remain motionless for hours, perfectly camouflaged in murky water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike unsuspecting prey. Cheryl Ann walked confidently toward the canal's edge, her years of authority as an educator having instilled in her an unwavering belief in her own judgment. Rusty bounded ahead, his leash dragging behind him as he sniffed excitedly at the water's edge. A lone fisherman casting his line from a nearby bridge called out a warning, suggesting she keep her distance from the water and control her dog. Cheryl Ann turned sharply, her voice carrying the same stern voice she had used to discipline countless students over her 40-year career, declaring that her lifelong Florida residency made her perfectly capable of assessing the situation. Her dismissive attitude reflected decades of being the final authority in every room she entered. The attack came without warning. As Cheryl Ann bent down to retrieve Rusty's leash, an 8-foot female alligator exploded from the murky shadows with terrifying speed. The massive reptile's jaws clamped down on Cheryl Ann's right leg just below the knee, her bone audibly cracking under the tremendous pressure. The alligator's teeth punctured through her skin and muscle tissue, creating deep lacerations that immediately began bleeding profusely. Cheryl Ann's scream pierced the humid air as she instinctively tried to pull away, but the alligator's grip only tightened. The predator's prehistoric instincts had been triggered by the perceived threat to her nearby nest, hidden among the cattails just 20 feet from where Cheryl Ann stood. The predator then executed its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Cheryl Ann was yanked off her feet and dragged toward the deeper water, her body tumbling helplessly as the alligator rotated with mechanical precision. The spinning motion tore her leg muscles and caused severe internal injuries as she was pulled beneath the surface. Water filled her lungs as she struggled desperately, but the alligator's relentless grip and the disorienting rotation made escape impossible. The death roll continued for nearly a minute before the alligator dragged her lifeless body toward a submerged culvert, where it would typically cache its prey for later consumption. Rusty fled into the surrounding vegetation, his terrified barking echoing across the preserve. The fisherman immediately dialed 911, his hands shaking as he described the horrific scene. Search and rescue teams arrived within 30 minutes. But Cheryl Ann's body wasn't recovered until 4 hours later, found partially submerged near the concrete culvert where the alligator had deposited her. Wildlife officials confirmed that the attacking alligator was a nesting female defending her territory during the peak of the breeding season. The investigation revealed that Cheryl Ann had unknowingly approached the critical defensive zone that triggers maternal aggression in nesting alligators. The incident prompted renewed calls for stricter enforcement of wildlife safety regulations in the Everglades. Cheryl Ann's sister released a brief statement asking for privacy during their time of grief, while acknowledging that her sister had always been headstrong and independent to a fault. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an investigation into the attack, ultimately determining that the alligator had acted according to its natural defensive instincts. Local park rangers increased patrols along Loop Road and installed additional warning signage. The tragic event served as a stark reminder that even lifelong Florida residents can underestimate the deadly power of the state's apex predators. It was October 14, 2023, when Martha Doyle ventured into the remote backcountry of Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. The 58-year-old elementary school librarian from Lexington, Kentucky, had recently retired after 32 years of service and sought solitude among the autumn-painted ridgelines. Dense hardwood forests stretched endlessly across the mountainous terrain, their canopy ablaze with crimson and gold leaves that filtered the afternoon sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. Martha had deliberately chosen an unmarked path, relying on a weathered topographical map from the 1980s that promised a scenic shortcut through less-traveled wilderness. Her independent nature and curiosity about unexplored paths had always served her well in life, though park rangers consistently advise visitors to remain on designated trails during peak bear activity season. Black bears are North America's most widely distributed bear species, with the Great Smoky Mountains hosting one of the densest populations in the eastern United States. Adult females typically weigh between 125 and 180 pounds, while their powerful limbs can propel them at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour. These omnivorous mammals possess exceptional climbing abilities and an acute sense of smell 50 times stronger than humans. During autumn months, bears enter hyperphagia, a feeding frenzy to accumulate fat reserves before winter hibernation. Mother bears with cubs become particularly aggressive during this period, as they must protect their offspring while securing adequate nutrition. Their maternal instincts trigger immediate defensive responses when humans approach within their perceived threat radius, typically around 50 yards. Martha had been hiking for 3 hours when she crested a narrow ridgeline approximately 2 miles from the nearest marked trail. Through a clearing between towering oak trees, she spotted a small black bear cub, roughly 6 months old, methodically foraging around a rotting tree stump. The cub appeared focused on extracting insects and grubs, seemingly unaware of her presence. Martha assumed the mother bear was elsewhere, perhaps hunting or resting in a distant den. She quietly retrieved a granola bar from her backpack and crouched behind a fallen log, hoping to observe the cub's behavior more closely. The sweet scent of her snack immediately caught the cub's attention, causing it to lift its head and emit a series of distressed vocalizations. Within seconds, a 160-pound female black bear crashed through the underbrush with explosive force. The sow had been foraging less than 30 yards away, hidden behind dense rhododendron thickets. Her ears flattened against her skull as she identified Martha as a threat to her offspring. The bear's charge covered the distance in under 4 seconds, her powerful hindquarters driving her forward with devastating momentum. Martha dropped her granola bar and scrambled toward a nearby tree, a mature hickory with low-hanging branches. Her hiking boots slipped on the leaf-covered slope as she desperately reached for the first branch, approximately 8 feet above ground level. The sow struck Martha's lower back with tremendous force, her 400-pound per square inch bite pressure crushing vertebrae and severing the spinal cord. Martha's body went limp as she collapsed face first into the forest floor. The bear's claws, each measuring over 2 inches in length, raked across Martha's torso, puncturing her lungs and causing massive internal hemorrhaging. The sow continued her assault for nearly 2 minutes, delivering multiple bites to Martha's neck and skull, fracturing her cervical vertebrae and causing fatal brain trauma. The attack ceased only when the mother bear determined the threat had been eliminated and returned to guide her cub away from the scene. Park rangers discovered Martha's remains 4 days later after her sister reported her overdue return. Her unused bear spray remained clipped to her belt, and her journal contained detailed observations about bear sightings throughout her hiking route. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency conducted a brief investigation, concluding that Martha had violated multiple safety protocols by approaching wildlife and traveling alone in high-risk areas. Her family established a memorial scholarship for outdoor education programs emphasizing wildlife safety awareness. The incident prompted park officials to increase bear safety education programs and install additional warning signs along popular hiking routes. Martha's death marked the 3rd fatal bear attack in the Great Smoky Mountains in 15 years, reinforcing the critical importance of maintaining safe distances from wildlife and carrying proper deterrent equipment. Local hiking groups organize memorial walks in her honor, using the tragic event to educate fellow outdoor enthusiasts about the unpredictable nature of wild animals and the devastating consequences of underestimating their protective instincts. It was July 4th, 2022 when Linda Mayfield met her fate in the sprawling wilderness of Yellowstone National Park's Hayden Valley. The morning sun cast long shadows across the golden grasslands as her tour group's van pulled into the designated viewing area. Steam rose from nearby hot springs, creating an ethereal mist that danced across the valley floor. Linda, a 52-year-old corporate consultant from Chicago, had joined this summer tour seeking adventure beyond her usual boardroom environment. Her assertive personality and decades of commanding corporate meetings had shaped her into someone accustomed to getting her way, often dismissing safety rules as unnecessary bureaucracy. The tour guide positioned the group at the recommended 100-yard distance from a grazing herd of American bison. These massive creatures, weighing up to 2,000 pounds, are North America's largest land mammals and among Yellowstone's most dangerous wildlife. Despite their docile appearance while grazing, bison are unpredictable animals capable of running 35 miles per hour and possessing incredible strength in their muscular shoulders and sharp horns. Bulls become particularly aggressive during mating season and when protecting territory. Their poor eyesight makes them easily startled, and they view any approaching figure as a potential threat. Linda grew increasingly frustrated watching through binoculars while other tourists snapped distant photos. Muttering about wanting a real experience rather than staring from afar, she broke away from the group and began walking directly toward the herd. Her tour guide shouted warnings, but Linda ignored them completely, her corporate confidence overriding basic wilderness safety. She approached to within 20 feet of a massive bull bison, raising her phone to capture a selfie with the animal in the background. The bull's head snapped up from grazing, his dark eyes fixing on Linda's approaching figure. His massive frame tensed as he perceived the threat. Without warning, the 1,800-pound animal lowered its head and charged with explosive force. Linda turned to flee, but her leather-soled shoes found no grip on the morning wet grass. She slipped and fell face first as the bull closed the distance in seconds. The bison's curved horn pierced Linda's back between her shoulder blades, the sharp point penetrating deep into her chest cavity. The impact lifted her from the ground before the animal's massive head shook violently, tearing through vital organs. As she fell, the bull's front hooves trampled her ribcage, crushing bones with sickening cracks that echoed across the valley. The animal then retreated to rejoin the herd, leaving Linda motionless on the bloodied grass. Park rangers arrived within minutes of the frantic radio calls, but Linda's injuries proved fatal. The horn wound had punctured her lung and heart, while the trampling had caused massive internal bleeding and multiple fractures. Fellow tourists stood in shocked silence, many requiring counseling after witnessing the brutal attack. An investigation confirmed Linda had violated park regulations by approaching wildlife within the mandatory safety distance. Her family released a brief statement requesting privacy, while expressing hope that others would learn from this tragedy. The incident prompted park officials to review safety protocols and increase ranger patrols in high-traffic wildlife viewing areas. The attack sparked widespread debate on social media about personal responsibility versus park safety measures. Wildlife experts use Linda's case as a teaching moment, emphasizing that bison injure more people in Yellowstone than any other animal, with most incidents occurring when visitors ignore established safety guidelines and approach too closely for photographs. The tour company also implemented stricter supervision policies following the incident. Linda's death became part of a disturbing trend of wildlife encounters gone wrong across America's national parks. Statistics showed that visitor injuries from large mammals had increased by 30% over the previous 5 years, with most incidents attributed to tourists seeking closer contact for social media content. Park officials nationwide began implementing new educational programs and stricter enforcement of wildlife viewing distances. The tragedy also highlighted the dangerous mindset of treating wild animals as photo opportunities rather than respecting them as unpredictable predators. Linda's corporate background, which had served her well in boardrooms, proved utterly inadequate when facing the raw power of nature's most formidable creatures in their natural habitat. Her death certificate listed the cause as massive internal trauma from bison attack, marking her as the third fatality in Yellowstone that summer. The incident occurred during peak tourist season when the park sees over 900,000 visitors monthly, many unfamiliar with proper wildlife safety protocols and drawn by social media images of seemingly docile animals. It was September 23, 2023, when Helen Crowley arrived at Wild Wonder Safari Park on the dusty outskirts of Branson, Missouri. The roadside attraction sat between a fireworks outlet and an abandoned gas station, its faded signage promising authentic wildlife encounters for half the price of legitimate zoos. Rusted chain-link fencing surrounded weathered enclosures where concrete had cracked and weeds pushed through gaps in the pavement. The facility operated with minimal staff and maximum profit margins, cutting corners wherever possible to maintain its budget-friendly reputation. Helen, a 63-year-old retired tax accountant from Fort Worth, had driven 3 hours specifically for this place after reading online reviews praising its hands-on approach to animal interactions. She clutched her discount coupon tightly, having chosen this facility over the more expensive Branson attractions because she believed most safety regulations were simply bureaucratic nonsense designed to fleece honest customers. Her late husband Robert had often warned her that her stubborn streak would get her into serious trouble someday, but Helen had dismissed his concerns just as readily as she now dismissed the safety rules. The irony wasn't lost on her friends back home, who knew that Helen meticulously followed every tax regulation to the letter in her professional life, while completely ignoring common sense safety rules everywhere else. Her decades of penny-pinching habits and stubborn conviction that rules were meant for people who didn't know better had shaped her approach to most situations throughout her retirement years. The African lion paced restlessly in his cramped enclosure, a magnificent but aging male whose golden mane had dulled from years of captivity in substandard conditions. These apex predators, weighing up to 420 pounds, possess a crushing jaw strength of 650 pounds per square inch, and can accelerate to 50 miles per hour in short bursts. Their territorial instincts remain razor-sharp even in captivity, triggered by sudden movements or perceived threats to their domain. Lions in confined spaces often develop heightened aggression due to stress and lack of adequate stimulation, making them particularly dangerous to untrained individuals. Helen approached the lion exhibit, expecting the premium experience advertised online, but found only standard viewing through reinforced bars with peeling paint and rust stains. Growing increasingly agitated, she cornered the lone attendant, a college student more focused on his phone than visitor safety protocols. She demanded access to the real lion experience she had paid for, insisting that proper animal handling was simply about projecting confidence and that she'd successfully managed large dogs throughout her life. When the attendant stepped away to refill the water pan, he carelessly left the service gate unlatched while distracted by the text message from his girlfriend. Helen noticed the gap immediately and slipped through the unlocked gate into the lion's territory without hesitation. She moved slowly toward the massive predator, convinced her calm demeanor would demonstrate dominance over what she dismissed as an oversized house cat that simply had been pampered by inexperienced handlers. The lion's ears flattened against his skull as this unfamiliar human invaded his space, his amber eyes tracking her every movement with predatory focus. Helen continued her approach, whispering reassurances about her experience with large dogs, completely misreading the animal's warning signals as mere curiosity rather than mounting aggression. The lion's muscles tensed as his territorial instincts engaged, a low rumble building in his chest that Helen mistook for purring. His tail began twitching rapidly, another clear danger sign that went unrecognized. Without warning, he exploded forward with devastating speed, covering the 15-foot distance in less than 2 seconds. His massive paw struck Helen's chest with bone-crushing force, sending her sprawling backward onto the concrete with multiple rib fractures. His jaws clamped down on her throat with hydraulic pressure, severing her carotid artery instantly while his claws raked across her torso, puncturing vital organs and causing massive internal bleeding. The attack lasted mere moments before staff members arrived with tranquilizer equipment, but Helen had already succumbed to massive blood loss and catastrophic trauma to her neck and chest cavity. The Missouri Department of Agriculture launched an immediate investigation into Wild Wonder Safari Park, citing multiple safety violations and inadequate staffing protocols that had created the conditions for this preventable tragedy. The facility faced permanent closure, while Helen's family pursued legal action against the owners for gross negligence and wrongful death. Animal rights groups called for stricter oversight of private wildlife facilities and mandatory safety training for all staff members. The morning of June 15, 2014 dawned with perfect safari conditions across South Africa's Kruger National Park. The African sun painted golden streaks across the savanna as a gentle breeze carried the scent of acacia trees through the dry air. For most tourists, this would be the adventure of a lifetime. But for Brenda Sue Whitfield, a 52-year-old real estate agent from Scottsdale, Arizona, it would be her last. Brenda Sue had built her reputation in Arizona's luxury real estate market through sheer determination and an unwavering belief that rules were merely suggestions for people like her. Friends described her as someone who always got her way, whether negotiating million-dollar deals or demanding special treatment at restaurants. She was known for her perfectly manicured nails, designer safari outfit, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. This was her first African safari with her husband, and she had spared no expense booking the most exclusive private tour available. She expected VIP treatment, and she expected the wildlife to cooperate with her vacation plans. Her husband had tried to warn her about respecting the guide's expertise, but Brenda Sue dismissed his concerns with the same wave of her hand that she used to brush off building inspectors back home. She had researched African wildlife on Google, watched a few documentaries, and was convinced she understood the animal behavior better than the locals who had spent their entire lives in the bush. After all, she reasoned, if these animals were truly dangerous, why would they allow tourists so close? At 4:20 p.m., their guide stopped the vehicle 50 yards from where a magnificent male lion was feeding on a freshly killed impala. The massive cat, weighing nearly 400 pounds, was in his prime, a territorial king whose golden mane was now stained with blood. The guide, a veteran with 20 years of experience, immediately recognized the extreme danger of the situation. Lions defending their kills are among the most aggressive animals in Africa, and this male had clearly just made his catch. The guide warned them that they had needed to maintain distance, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen what these predators could do. He explained that the lion was feeding and would view any approach as a direct threat to his meal. Lions defending kills have been known to charge vehicles, and getting out of one would be suicidal. But Brenda Sue was having none of it. She had paid premium prices for this experience, and she wasn't about to settle for distant photos of a feeding lion. She declared that she knew what she was doing, her voice dripping with the same condescension that she used with difficult clients. She insisted that the lion was too focused on eating to care about them. When the guide refused to drive closer, explaining that it would violate every safety protocol and put everyone at mortal risk, Brenda Sue made a decision that would seal her fate. She opened the vehicle door and stepped out, ignoring her husband's desperate pleas and the guide's shocked commands to get back inside. She announced that she was just going to get a better angle for photos, her designer boots crunching on the dry grass. She claimed the lion was too busy eating to notice her. She walked 20 feet toward the feeding lion, her camera raised, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just triggered every territorial instinct in one of Africa's most dangerous predators. What Brenda Sue didn't understand was that male lions defending fresh kills are hardwired by millions of years of evolution to eliminate any threat to their meal with lethal force. Their powerful hindquarters contain muscles capable of generating explosive bursts of speed, while their massive paws, each the size of a dinner plate, are equipped with retractable claws that can disembowel prey with a single swipe. Most terrifyingly, their jaws can exert a crushing force of 650 pounds per square inch, enough to snap the spine of a zebra in seconds. The lion's head snapped up from his meal, blood dripping from his muzzle, as his amber eyes locked onto this strange creature that had dared to approach his kill. His muscles tensed, his massive frame coiling like a spring loaded with 400 pounds of lethal power. Lions can accelerate from 0 to 35 miles per hour in mere seconds, and this territorial male saw Brenda Sue's approach as a direct challenge to his meal, a threat that demanded an immediate and violent response. The attack happened within 15 feet of the kill site, close enough for her husband to see every horrifying detail, but too close for the guide to intervene safely without risking everyone's lives. The lion's protective instincts over his fresh kill, combined with Brenda Sue's complete dismissal of expert warnings and her entitled belief that the rules didn't apply to her, proved fatal in the most brutal way possible. Park rangers arrived 25 minutes later, but the territorial male had dragged both his original kill and Brenda Sue into thick brush where he could feed undisturbed. The incident led to mandatory child-proof locks on all safari vehicles and enhanced safety briefings that emphasized the deadly consequences of approaching feeding predators. August 3, 2015 brought picture-perfect weather to Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The morning mist was lifting from the valleys as golden sunlight filtered through the towering pines, creating the kind of postcard scenery that drew millions of visitors each year. The crisp mountain air carried the scent of wildflowers and pine needles, promising another beautiful day in America's first national park. For most families, this would be a day of wonder and discovery. But for Tiffany Lynn Mitchell, a 45-year-old marketing executive from Denver, Colorado, it would be her final morning. Tiffany Lynn had built her career in corporate marketing through aggressive tactics and an unwavering belief that persistence always paid off. She was the type of executive who never accepted no for an answer, whether she was negotiating contracts or demanding upgrades at a hotel. Her family knew her as someone who researched every vacation destination obsessively, creating detailed itineraries that maximize photo opportunities and social media content. She had been complaining to park rangers for 3 days about wildlife being too far away for good photos, insisting that the park's safety distances were overly cautious and designed to ruin the tourist experience. Her husband and teenage children had grown tired of her constant complaints about the park's restrictions. They watched in embarrassment as she argued with rangers about getting closer to elk herds and bison, always insisting that her expensive camera equipment required closer proximity for professional quality shots. Tiffany Lynn had done her research, reading blog posts about wildlife photography and watching YouTube videos that convinced her she understood animal behavior well enough to bend the rules safely. She had been particularly frustrated by the park's 100-yard rule for bears, calling it ridiculous government overreach and pointing to other tourists who seemed to get closer without consequences. What she didn't understand was that those other tourists were using telephoto lenses and maintaining safe distances, the very precautions she dismissed as unnecessary limitations on her vacation experience. At 7:45 a.m., while hiking alone after leaving her family at the campsite, Tiffany Lynn rounded a bend in the trail and froze. Just 30 feet ahead, a massive 400-pound female grizzly bear was foraging with their 2 cubs in a berry patch beside the path. The family group was completely unaware of her presence, focused on the abundant huckleberries that lined the trail. Any experienced hiker would have immediately backed away slowly and given the bear family a wide berth, but Tiffany Lynn saw this as the perfect photo opportunity she had been seeking. She raised her camera and began taking pictures, the clicking sound echoing through the quiet forest. The mother bear's head snapped up at the unfamiliar sound. She immediately spotted Tiffany Lynn and assessed the situation with the lightning-fast instincts of a protective mother. Here was a potential threat positioned directly between her and one of her cubs, who had wandered slightly down the trail behind the human. What Tiffany Lynn didn't understand was that she had stumbled into the most dangerous scenario possible in bear country. Grizzly bears possess a bite force of over 1,200 pounds per square inch, nearly twice that of a lion, and their massive claws can grow up to 4 inches long, perfectly designed for digging through frozen ground and tearing apart logs in search of food. Their shoulder muscles, which create the distinctive hump on their backs, contain enough power to flip over 700-pound rocks with ease. Most terrifyingly, despite weighing up to 600 pounds, grizzlies can reach speeds of 35 miles per hour in short bursts, faster than any human has ever run. The sow's protective instincts kicked in immediately. She stood up on her hind legs, huffing and jaw-popping, clear warning signs that Tiffany Lynn completely misinterpreted. Instead of backing away, she took another step forward for a better shot, excited by what she thought was the bear posing for her camera. The mother grizzly dropped to all fours and charged. From 30 feet away, she covered the distance in less than 2 seconds, her massive frame moving with terrifying speed and purpose. Tiffany Lynn fumbled for her bear spray, but there was no time. The protective mother struck with the full force of her 400-pound body, her primary goal to eliminate the threat to her cubs. The attack was swift and devastating. Other hikers found the scene 20 minutes later and immediately called for help, but Tiffany Lynn had died from massive trauma within minutes. Her camera was found nearby, the memory card filled with photos that documented her final, fatal mistake. The incident reinforced exactly why Yellowstone safety distances exist. Rules written in the blood of those who learn too late that mother bears will kill to protect their young. March 28, 2016 brought another perfect evening to Naples, Florida, where the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks above the manicured golf courses and luxury communities that defined this slice of paradise. The temperature was a comfortable 78 degrees, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass through the upscale neighborhood. For most residents, this would be another peaceful evening in their gated community. But for Deborah Ann Rodriguez, a 38-year-old HOA president, it would be her last. Deborah Ann had earned her reputation as the neighborhood's most demanding resident through years of micromanaging every aspect of community life. She was the type of HOA president who measured grass heights with a ruler, issued citations for mailboxes that were the wrong shade of white, and held emergency board meetings about holiday decorations that violated the community's aesthetic standards. She had been elected HOA president 3 years running, primarily because no one else wanted to deal with the constant complaints and confrontations that seemed to energize her. Deborah Ann took pride in maintaining property values and community standards, but her methods often crossed the line from thorough to tyrannical. For the past 3 weeks, Deborah Ann had been waging a personal war against the alligators that had taken up residence in the community's scenic pond near the 7th hole of their golf course. She had filed complaints with the county, demanded immediate removal services, and sent increasingly angry emails to the property management company about what she called an unacceptable threat to their community's safety and property values. What Deborah Ann didn't understand, or chose to ignore, was that it was peak nesting season, and the 9-foot female alligator she'd been complaining about had built her nest directly on the bank where Deborah Ann liked to walk her small dog each evening. Female alligators during nesting season become incredibly aggressive, transforming from relatively docile reptiles into 300-pound engines of maternal fury that will attack anything perceived as a threat to their eggs. At 6:30 p.m., armed with a 9-foot iron from her husband's golf bag and fueled by weeks of frustration, Deborah Ann decided to take matters into her own hands. She had watched enough Animal Planet to convince herself that alligators were essentially overgrown lizards that could be intimidated into leaving if someone just showed them who's boss. She didn't want to pay HOA fees to live next to a swamp. She marched toward the pond, her designer golf outfit and perfectly styled hair reflecting her confidence that this would be a simple matter of asserting human dominance over a primitive reptile. As she approached the water's edge, Deborah Ann didn't notice the carefully constructed nest mound hidden among the reeds just 3 feet from where she stood. The female alligator had been lying motionless in the shallow water, perfectly camouflaged, but every fiber of her being was focused on defending her future offspring. Deborah Ann stepped directly onto the edge of the nest mound while trying to get a better angle to poke at what she thought was just a pile of debris. She began jabbing at the nest with her golf club, treating it like an unwanted anthill that needed to be destroyed. What Deborah Ann had failed to comprehend was that she was now directly threatening one of nature's most ancient and efficient killing machines in its most dangerous state. American alligators are living dinosaurs, virtually unchanged for over 200 million years, with jaws capable of exerting a crushing force of 2,125 pounds per square inch, enough to snap a human femur like a twig. Most terrifyingly, alligators can launch their entire body length out of the water in explosive lunges, and despite their prehistoric appearance, they can move at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour on land in short bursts. The 300-pound female exploded from the water with the fury of a mother defending her children. From just 3 feet away, there was no escape. The protective mother was operating on millions of years of evolutionary programming that made her one of nature's most efficient killing machines. Deborah Ann tried to swing her golf club, but the alligator's massive jaws clamped down on her leg with bone-crushing force. The death roll that followed in the shallow water was immediate and fatal. The alligator's ancient technique for disorienting and drowning prey proving devastatingly effective against human anatomy. Neighbors heard her screams from 200 yards away, but the attack lasted less than 2 minutes. Wildlife officers recovered her body 45 minutes later after tranquilizing the protective mother, who had returned to guarding her damaged nest as if nothing had happened. September 12, 2017 brought ideal weather to rural Georgia, where the late summer sun flittered through the canopy of oak and pine trees surrounding a private exotic animal sanctuary. The temperature was a perfect 75 degrees with low humidity, creating the kind of comfortable conditions that made outdoor activities a pleasure. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves as the sanctuary's big cats lounged in their enclosures, seemingly peaceful in the afternoon warmth. For most visitors, this would be an educational and inspiring experience. But for Crystal Marie Thompson, a 41-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative from Atlanta, it would be her final afternoon. Crystal Marie had built her career in pharmaceutical sales through a combination of charm, persistence, and an unwavering belief that the right connections could open any door. She was known among her colleagues as someone who always found a way to get VIP treatment, whether it was securing the best tables at restaurants or gaining access to exclusive medical conferences. Her success had made her wealthy, and she had learned to use her financial contributions as leverage to get special treatment wherever she went. She had discovered the Exotic Animal Sanctuary through her book club, a group of affluent Atlanta women who prided themselves on finding unique experiences that their social media followers would envy. Crystal Marie had immediately seen an opportunity to stand out from the crowd. She made a substantial donation to the sanctuary and expected that her generosity would translate into special access and experiences beyond what ordinary visitors received. The sanctuary staff had tried to explain that all visitors, regardless of their donation level, were required to follow the same safety rules. But Crystal Marie had dismissed their concerns with the same confidence she used when convincing doctors to prescribe her company's medications. She had done her research, watching big cat documentaries and reading about animal behavior online, and was convinced that the sanctuary's restrictions were overly cautious. During the afternoon feeding demonstration, Crystal Marie positioned herself at the front of the viewing area. her expensive camera equipment ready to capture the kind of dramatic photos that would make her the envy of her social circle. She watched as the 450-pound male Siberian tiger received his daily meal in the outer enclosure, noting how lazy and docile the massive predator appeared. At 2:15 p.m., while the keeper was distracted answering questions from other visitors, Crystal Marie made a decision that would cost her everything. She climbed over the 4-foot public barrier, then scaled the secondary 6-foot safety fence, bringing herself directly to the primary enclosure barrier, a 10-foot chain-link fence that was the only thing separating her from one of nature's most efficient killing machines. She complained loudly to anyone who would listen that the viewing area was too far away for good photos, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was now only separated from a 450-pound apex predator by a single fence. She declared that she had donated enough money to this place and should be able to get decent pictures. What Crystal Marie didn't understand was that the tiger was in feeding mode, his predatory instincts heightened by the presence of fresh meat. The massive cat immediately focused on her as she pressed against the fence, his amber eyes tracking her every movement with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. Her expensive perfume, rapid breathing, and erratic movements triggered every hunting instinct the tiger possessed. When Crystal Marie reached through the chain-link fence trying to get an extreme close-up photo, she unknowingly triggered the hunting instincts of one of the planet's most formidable predators. Siberian tigers are the largest cats on Earth, with males weighing up to 660 pounds of pure muscle and bone. Their massive paws, each the size of a dinner plate, are equipped with retractable claws that can grow up to 4 inches long, sharp enough to slice through Kevlar and strong enough to crush skulls. Their bite force of over 1,000 pounds per square inch of pressure can snap the spine of a wild boar, while their powerful hindquarters allowed them to leap vertically up to 12 feet. Most terrifyingly, tigers are ambush predators, capable of moving with complete silence despite their enormous size, striking with explosive speed that gives prey no chance to escape. The tiger's response was explosive and immediate. As Crystal Marie's arm extended through the fence, the massive cat struck with lightning precision. His enormous paw, moving faster than the human eye could follow, grabbed her forearm and pulled with devastating force. The chain-link fence held her body back, but her arm was now completely within the tiger's reach. The tiger's claws, designed by evolution to bring down prey weighing hundreds of pounds, punctured through Crystal Marie's arm and shoulder with devastating efficiency. His powerful jaws clamped down on her extended limb with bone-crushing force, while his other paw raked across whatever he could reach through the fence. Crystal Marie's screams echoed across the sanctuary as the tiger's predatory instincts took over completely. Sanctuary staff responded with tranquilizer guns and emergency protocols, but the damage was catastrophic. Crystal Marie died from massive trauma and blood loss within minutes, her expensive camera equipment scattered on the ground, the memory cards filled with photos that documented her final, fatal mistake. The incident resulted in triple barrier systems being installed at all big cat facilities nationwide, with the innermost barrier placed far enough from the enclosure that no visitor could reach through to the animals. Crystal Marie's donation plaque was quietly removed from the sanctuary's wall, a grim reminder that money cannot buy safety when dealing with apex predators. July 4th, 2018 brought postcard-perfect conditions to the exclusive Bahamian resort where crystal-clear turquoise waters lapped against pristine white sand beaches. The temperature was a balmy 82 degrees with gentle trade winds carrying the scent of tropical flowers across the luxury property. Colorful fish darted through the coral reefs visible from the shore, while palm trees swayed lazily in the afternoon breeze. For most guests, this would be the ultimate tropical paradise experience. But for Ashley Nicole Davis, a 49-year-old investment banker from Manhattan, it would be her final sunset. Ashley Nicole had built her Wall Street career through aggressive tactics and an unshakable belief that rules were obstacles to be overcome rather than guidelines to be followed. She was known in Manhattan's financial circles as someone who always found a way to get what she wanted, whether it was closing impossible deals or securing reservations at fully booked restaurants. Her success had made her wealthy beyond most people's dreams, and she had learned to use that wealth as a weapon against anyone who dared to tell her no. This Bahamian vacation was supposed to be her reward for another record-breaking year in investment banking. She had booked the resort's most expensive suite and expected every aspect of her stay to be perfect. From the moment she arrived, Ashley Nicole had been complaining about what she called the resort's overly cautious approach to water activities, demanding access to areas that had been marked off limits for guest safety. The resort staff had tried to explain that recent bull shark activity in the area had prompted temporary restrictions on swimming in certain zones, particularly near the fishing dock where charter boats clean their daily catch. But Ashley Nicole dismissed these warnings as resort paranoia, designed to limit her vacation experience, convinced that the staff was simply trying to avoid liability rather than addressing real safety concerns. She had done her own research on her phone, reading travel blogs that claim shark attacks were statistically insignificant and watching documentaries that portrayed sharks as misunderstood creatures that rarely bothered humans. Armed with this superficial knowledge, Ashley Nicole was convinced that the resort's restrictions were nothing more than corporate overcautiousness that was ruining her expensive vacation. At 6:15 p.m., as the sun began to set and the golden hour lighting created perfect conditions for both photography and predator hunting, Ashley Nicole made a decision that would seal her fate. Despite red flag warnings and the complete absence of other swimmers, she entered the water near the resort's fishing dock during the exact time when charter boats were returning and cleaning their daily catch. The area was a perfect storm of shark-attracting conditions. Murky water filled with fish blood and scraps from the day's charter boat returns, the low-light conditions of dusk that made it difficult for both sharks and humans to distinguish shapes clearly, and the dinner hour when many marine predators become most active. Ashley Nicole swam 150 yards from shore into 15 feet of water, directly into what marine biologists would later describe as a feeding zone. What Ashley Nicole had failed to understand was that she had just entered the hunting ground of one of the ocean's most aggressive and unpredictable predators during their peak feeding time. Bull sharks are unique among shark species for their ability to hunt in both saltwater and freshwater, with a tolerance for shallow, murky water that makes them particularly dangerous to swimmers. Unlike great whites, which typically hunt in deeper water, bull sharks actively patrol coastal areas and are responsible for more attacks on humans than any other shark species. Stocky, muscular build houses a bite force of over 1,300 pounds of pressure per square inch, stronger than both great whites and tiger sharks, while their broad, flat snouts are perfectly designed for stunning prey in shallow water. Most terrifyingly, bull sharks are known for their aggressive temperament and tendency to attack first and investigate later, making them unpredictable killers that strike without warning. A 9-foot bull shark, already in feeding mode from the abundant fish scraps in the water, detected Ashley Nicole's movements from over 200 yards away. The shark's electroreceptors, capable of sensing the electrical impulses generated by a beating heart, locked onto this new source of bioelectric activity in its established hunting ground. The murky water and failing light created perfect ambush conditions. The attack came in 15 feet of water during the golden hour when visibility was severely compromised. Bull sharks attack with explosive speed and devastating power, their serrated teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone with surgical precision. Ashley Nicole's expensive swimsuit and jewelry offered no protection against millions of years of evolutionary perfection. Her screams alerted the dock workers, but she was too far from shore for immediate rescue. Resort jet ski teams reached her location within 8 minutes, their response time impressive by any standard, but the bull shark's initial attack had severed the femoral artery in her leg. Ashley Nicole died from blood loss during the rescue attempt, the warm Bahamian waters turning crimson around the rescue boat as paramedics fought desperately to save her life. The incident led to permanent relocation of fish cleaning stations away from swimming areas at all Caribbean resorts and mandatory sunset swimming bans near fishing operations. Ashley Nicole's story became a cautionary tale shared among resort staff throughout the region. A reminder that even in paradise, the ocean's apex predators follow rules far older and more unforgiving than any human regulation. As the sun set over the Bahamian waters, painting the sky in brilliant reds and golds, Ashley Nicole's tragedy served as a final reminder that nature's predators don't recognize wealth, status, or entitlement. They only understand the ancient laws of survival that have governed the wild world for millions of years. Laws that no amount of money or influence can ever change. The afternoon of June 15, 2014 brought perfect golden hour lighting to Kruger National Park, South Africa. For Cheryl Whitfield, 52, a successful Scottsdale real estate agent, this would become her final photo session. Cheryl had booked this expensive private safari tour for her 25th wedding anniversary, spending nearly $20,000 on what she considered a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Having grown up watching nature documentaries and visiting zoos, she felt more prepared for African wildlife than most other tourists, though her actual experience was limited to photographing deer in Arizona state parks. Her safari guide Thabo was a seasoned professional with over 15 years of experience who had initially been impressed by Cheryl's enthusiasm. However, as the day progressed, he grew concerned by her increasing frustration with safety protocols and her tendency to question his expertise. She had already pushed boundaries twice that morning, stepping out of the vehicle briefly for photos despite his warnings. At 4:45 p.m., their vehicle approached a pride of lions resting beneath acacia trees. The magnificent cats were in their element. A dominant male, several females, and cubs scattered in the dappled shade. Cheryl's excitement was palpable as she raised her expensive camera, snapping photos through the open vehicle window while expressing frustration about the distance between them and the lions. Thabo explained that they were already at the optimal distance for both safety and photography, noting that the pride was showing signs of alertness. He pointed out the male's posture and the way several females had lifted their heads, subtle signs that experienced guides learned to read. But Cheryl had spent her career overcoming obstacles and finding solutions when others said something was impossible. Looking at the distance between the vehicle and the lions, she made a calculation that would prove fatal. Her hand moved toward the door handle as she rationalized that her experience with animals and careful approach would keep her safe. African lions are apex predators that have ruled the savannah for millennia. A dominant male can weigh up to 420 pounds and possesses a bite force of over 650 pounds per square inch, powerful enough to crush the skull of a buffalo. When their territory is invaded or they perceive a threat, their predatory instincts override any tolerance they might have developed for human presence. Before Thabo could physically stop her, Cheryl had opened the door and stepped onto the African soil. She moved slowly and deliberately, her camera raised, genuinely believing that her careful approach would keep her safe. She had seen countless nature documentaries where photographers worked near big cats, and she convinced herself that this was no different. The dominant male lion had been resting but was immediately alert to this new development. Lions are territorial animals with finely tuned threat assessment abilities, and the approach of this upright, unfamiliar creature triggered millions of years of evolutionary programming. Cheryl managed to take several photos, feeling vindicated as the lion seemed to tolerate her presence. She called back to the vehicle, expressing her belief that the animals weren't bothered by her presence, and that she had successfully demonstrated that they weren't threatened by her approach. But she had misread the situation entirely. The male's stillness wasn't tolerance. It was the focused attention of a predator, calculating distance and timing. When Cheryl took 2 more steps closer to frame a better shot, she crossed an invisible boundary that the lion had established. The charge came with explosive power that covered 30 yards in under 4 seconds. Cheryl's scream of terror cut through the African air as she realized her fatal miscalculation. But there was no time to run, no time to retreat to the vehicle. The massive predator struck her with devastating force, his powerful jaws clamping down as she was knocked to the ground. Thabo immediately fired warning shots and started the engine, but the lion's predatory instincts had fully engaged. The attack was swift and decisive, lasting less than 2 minutes, but seeming like an eternity to the horrified witnesses. The incident sparked international media attention and led to mandatory vehicle locks on all safari vehicles in South Africa. Cheryl's husband filed the wrongful death lawsuit against the tour company, which was ultimately dismissed when investigators determined that Thabo had followed all proper safety protocols. The morning of August 3, 2015 dawned crisp and clear in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. For Tiffany Patterson, 48, a successful Denver marketing executive, this beautiful morning would become her last. Tiffany had arrived at Yellowstone with her family 3 days earlier for what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation, but she had grown increasingly frustrated with what she perceived as extensive restrictions. She had already received 2 warnings from rangers, one for approaching elk too closely while trying to get better photos, and one for leaving a designated trail to reach a better viewpoint. Each warning had reinforced her belief that park regulations were overly cautious and designed more for liability protection than actual safety. At 7:20 a.m., while hiking the scenic Fairy Falls Trail with her reluctant family, Tiffany encountered something that would test her confidence in the most brutal way possible. Through a clearing in the dense forest, she spotted a female grizzly bear with 2 small cubs, peacefully foraging for berries in a sun-dappled meadow about 60 yards away. Her first instinct was actually appropriate. She stopped walking and quietly pointed out the bears to her family. For a moment, she stood in genuine awe of the magnificent animals. But as she watched other hikers taking photos from a safe distance with telephoto lenses, Tiffany began to feel frustrated by the limitations of her phone camera. The bears looked tiny in her photos, and she knew her friends back home would be disappointed by the distant, unclear images. She whispered to her husband about getting closer for better photos, but he immediately grabbed her arm and reminded her about the ranger's warnings regarding mother bears with cubs. She paused, genuinely considering his words. The mandatory safety briefing had been clear about the dangers of approaching bears, especially mothers with young. But looking at the peaceful scene in front of her, with the bears calmly foraging and showing no signs of aggression, she convinced herself that the warnings were generic precautions that didn't apply to this specific situation. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing between 200 and 400 pounds and possessing strength that defies imagination. A grizzly's claws can grow up to 4 inches long and are powerful enough to tear through tree bark and dig through frozen ground. But it's their protective instinct toward their cubs that makes them truly deadly. A mother grizzly will attack anything she perceives as a threat to her offspring. Tiffany assured her husband she would be careful and would stop if the bears even looked at her. She pulled out her phone and expressed her desire to capture just one good photo to show people back home. She began walking slowly toward the meadow, genuinely trying to be respectful and non-threatening. Her approach was cautious and deliberate, and for the first 20 yards, the bear seemed unaware of her presence. This reinforced her belief that she was handling the situation correctly. But as she moved within 30 yards of the bear's family, the mother grizzly's head lifted from her foraging. The massive female had been aware of the human presence from the beginning, but had initially chosen to ignore it while keeping herself positioned between the potential threat and her cubs. Tiffany stopped when she saw the bear looking at her, raising her phone to capture what she thought would be the perfect shot. She whispered about how incredible the moment was, not realizing that her voice was carrying across the meadow. The mother grizzly's ears flattened against her skull, a warning sign that Tiffany didn't recognize. The bear took several steps toward her, and Tiffany, instead of backing away, stood her ground and continued taking photos, interpreting the bear's movement as curiosity rather than a threat display. When Tiffany took 3 more steps forward to get an even better angle, the protective mother had seen enough. With a roar that echoed through the forest, she charged at full speed toward the woman who had ignored every warning signal and positioned herself as a threat to her cubs. Grizzly bears can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, faster than any human could ever hope to run. And this mother was driven by the most powerful force in nature, the need to protect her young. Tiffany's attempt to run triggered the bear's chase instinct, the worst possible response in a grizzly encounter. The attack occurred in a dense forest where her screams were muffled by towering pines. Despite the immediate response from park rangers who had been monitoring the area due to recent bear activity, Tiffany sustained fatal injuries from an animal that was simply following millions of years of evolutionary programming to protect her offspring. Tiffany's death led to the most comprehensive overhaul of Yellowstone's visitor safety protocols in the park's history. Her family filed a federal lawsuit against the National Park Service, which was ultimately settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. The evening of March 12, 2016 brought spectacular sunset conditions to Cairns, Queensland, Australia. For Bethany Rodriguez, 44, a successful insurance claim manager from Phoenix, Arizona, this would become her final swim. Bethany had arrived at the upscale resort 3 days earlier with sky-high expectations and an attitude that had already made her notorious among the staff. As someone who prided herself on always getting her way through persistence and complaints, she had spent every moment since arrival demanding upgrades, special treatment, and access to areas that other guests simply accepted as off-limits. Her husband Mark had grown increasingly embarrassed by her behavior, watching helplessly as she berated housekeeping staff for not providing enough towels, demanding that the restaurant kitchen prepare meals that weren't on the menu, and insisted that the concierge personally escort her to every activity. The main pool situation had become her first major battleground. When she complained loudly to the pool attendant about children splashing near her, demanding they be moved to a different area, she was politely told that the pool was open to all guests. This response triggered her immediate escalation to the manager, where she spent 20 minutes explaining her status as a premium guest and her expectation of adult-only pool time. When that failed, she turned her attention to the beach access, arguing with lifeguards about the designated swimming areas and insisting that the roped-off sections were just suggestions rather than actual boundaries. She had already been warned twice about swimming outside the safe zone, each time responding with lectures about her swimming abilities and her rights as a paying customer. But it was the beautiful secluded lagoon visible from her balcony that became her obsession. She had approached the staff multiple times, each interaction becoming more heated as she was repeatedly told the area was completely off limits due to wildlife dangers. She had cornered the resort manager that morning, demanding to know exactly what wildlife posed such a threat that paying guests couldn't access what was clearly part of the resort property. When told about saltwater crocodiles, she had laughed dismissively and pulled out her phone to show him statistics about crocodile attacks, explaining that she had done her research and knew the actual risks were minimal. The area in question was a pristine mangrove lagoon, separated from the resort by multiple barriers and warning signs. Danger signs were posted in English, Japanese, and German, along with detailed explanations about the saltwater crocodiles that inhabited these waters. At 6:30 p.m., as the golden hour light began to fade, Bethany made her move. She had changed into her most expensive swimsuit and brought her waterproof phone to document what she planned to present as evidence of the resort's excessive caution. She found a section where the fencing had been damaged by recent storms, creating a gap that allowed access without actually breaking any physical barriers. Saltwater crocodiles are among the world's most efficient predators, virtually unchanged by millions of years of evolution. These apex predators can grow up to 23 feet in length and weigh over a ton, with a bite force of 3,700 pounds per square inch, the strongest of any living animal. She floated peacefully for nearly 10 minutes, watching tropical birds in the mangrove canopy above and composing the triumphant social media posts she would share. What Bethany didn't know was that a 14-foot saltwater crocodile had been hunting in the deeper sections of the lagoon when she entered the water. The massive reptile had detected her presence immediately through vibrations in the water and had been slowly positioning itself for an optimal attack angle. The attack came without warning, a sudden, violent eruption of water as the crocodile launched himself from the depths with explosive force. Bethany's scream was cut short as massive jaws clamped down with crushing power, and the water churned violently as the predator executed his death roll, a technique perfected over millions of years of evolution. Within moments, the lagoon returned to an eerie calm, broken only by ripples that quickly faded in the evening breeze. Resort security, alerted by guests who had heard Bethany's brief scream and the violent churning of water, found only her belongings on the shore and her phone floating in the lagoon, still recording her final moments. Bethany's death triggered the largest tourism safety investigation in Queensland's history. Her husband filed a massive lawsuit resulting in a $12 million settlement, the largest tourism-related payout in Australian history. The settlement led to mandatory crocodile proofing of all resort properties within 50 kilometers of known crocodile habitats, costing the tourism industry over $200 million in infrastructure upgrades. The afternoon of July 28, 2017 brought ideal hiking conditions to Olympic National Park, Washington. For Heather Thompson, 50, a successful corporate trainer from Seattle, this would become her final opportunity to prove her superiority over what she considered incompetent government bureaucrats and their ridiculous safety regulations. Heather had built her business on the premise that she knew better than everyone else how to provide authentic wilderness experiences. Her corporate retreats were marketed specifically to executives and professionals who were tired of being treated like children by overly cautious park services and tour operators. She was leading 8 office colleagues on what she had designed as an elite leadership retreat, constantly reminding them that they were getting an experience that went far beyond what ordinary tourists received. Her group consisted of accountants, marketing professionals, and middle managers who had paid premium prices for what Heather promised would be an authentic wilderness challenge. From the moment they arrived at Olympic National Park, Heather had been vocal about her disdain for what she called government overreach in wilderness management. She had spent the entire drive to the trailhead explaining to her guests how park rangers were typically inexperienced college graduates who had never actually spent serious time in real wilderness situations, unlike herself. The trouble began when they reached the official trailhead and encountered fresh warnings about recent black bear activity in the area. Multiple signs warned hikers to stay on designated trails, make noise while hiking, and report any bear sightings immediately. Heather's reaction was immediate and predictable. She rolled her eyes dramatically and launched into one of her signature lectures about government incompetence. She gathered her group around her and began explaining, in her most condescending tone, how these warnings were typical examples of bureaucratic overreach designed to keep people dependent on guided tours and official programs. She made sure her clients understood that following these restrictive warnings would mean missing out on the authentic leadership experience they had paid premium prices to receive. 5:15 p.m., after delivering another lecture about how real outdoor professionals like herself knew how to assess actual risks versus bureaucratic paranoia, Heather made the decision to take her group onto an unmarked trail. When they encountered fresh black bear tracks and scat on the trail, Heather's response was entirely predictable. She gathered her nervous clients around the evidence and began another impromptu lecture about how this was exactly the kind of thing that would send less qualified guides running back to the safety of designated trails. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds, but capable of reaching 600 pounds during peak feeding season. While generally more timid than grizzlies, black bears become extremely aggressive when defending food sources or feeling cornered. A 250-pound male black bear had been feeding in a rich berry patch nearby, building up the fat reserves he would need to survive the coming winter hibernation. When he heard the loud, confident voice of Heather explaining bear behavior to her group, particularly her dismissive comments about park ranger competence, his defensive instincts immediately activated. The encounter happened suddenly but not without warning. The bear emerged from dense undergrowth about 40 yards ahead of the group, clearly agitated by their presence in his territory during the critical feeding season. Instead of immediately implementing proper bear safety protocols, Heather saw this as the perfect teaching moment to demonstrate her superior wilderness expertise. She positioned herself between the bear and her clients, speaking in what she believed was an authoritative tone about proper bear encounter techniques. She explained to her terrified group that this was exactly the kind of authentic wildlife experience that made her services superior to sanitized park tours. For several tense minutes, the standoff continued. The bear showed classic defensive behavior, huffing, jaw-popping, and making short bluff charges that stopped well short of the group. But instead of recognizing these as serious escalation warnings, Heather treated them as validation of her expertise, continuing to lecture her clients about bear behavior and wilderness leadership principles. Her voice grew louder and more authoritative as she demonstrated what she called proper bear dominance techniques, completely misreading the animal's increasingly agitated state. She explained that the bear was simply testing their resolve and that maintaining confident leadership would cause him to retreat. The situation deteriorated rapidly when one of her clients, panicked by the bear's increasingly aggressive bluff charges, broke from the group and ran. This triggered the bear's chase instinct, and the 250-pound predator immediately pursued the fleeing human. Heather, still convinced of her expertise, ran toward the bear while shouting instructions about proper bear encounter techniques. The bear, now fully committed to protecting his territory, turned on Heather with the full force of an animal that recognized no human authority or self-proclaimed expertise. Her final moments were spent discovering that her superiority complex and dismissive attitude towards safety warnings had not actually made her the wilderness expert she believed herself to be. The attack occurred in a thick forest during the bear's peak foraging time. While her sacrifice did allow her fleeing client to escape, and her group's panic screaming eventually drove the bear away, Heather sustained injuries that proved fatal, despite immediate first aid attempts and rapid evacuation by helicopter rescue teams. Heather's death resulted in the most significant changes to commercial wilderness guiding regulations in Washington state history, ironically implementing exactly the kind of government oversight she had spent her career opposing. Her corporate training business was continued by her business partner, who transformed it into a wilderness safety education company that now emphasizes the importance of respecting both wildlife and the expertise of Park Service professionals. The afternoon of November 5, 2013 brought unreasonably warm weather to rural Oklahoma. For Stephanie Stevens, 46, a successful pharmaceutical sales representative from Atlanta, this would become her final volunteer session. Stephanie had discovered a genuine love for wildlife conservation and had been volunteering at a small roadside zoo facility for over a year, contributing both time and substantial financial support to help care for rescued exotic animals. Unlike many roadside operations, this facility focused on education and rescue rather than entertainment. Her pharmaceutical background had proven valuable to the facility. She understood animal medications and had helped establish better veterinary care protocols. Her social media presence had gradually shifted toward wildlife education as she learned more about conservation challenges. The facility owner, David, had initially been grateful for Stephanie's expertise and financial support. She had helped fund improved enclosures, better veterinary care, and educational programs. However, as her involvement deepened, she had begun requesting increased access to the animals for educational content creation, pushing against safety protocols that David knew were essential. Her relationship with Raja, the facility's Bengal tiger, had developed over months of careful interaction through barriers. She had studied tiger behavior extensively and had created educational content that helped people understand the complexity of big cat behavior and the challenges of caring for these magnificent predators in captivity. At 3:45 p.m., Stephanie arrived for what she planned as a routine volunteer session, but she had been increasingly frustrated by the limitations on her ability to create the kind of educational content she believed could make a real difference in wildlife conservation awareness. Her social media following had grown substantially, and she felt the responsibility to provide increasingly engaging content. As they walked toward Raja's enclosure, Stephanie brought up her ideas for an educational video series with David. She expressed her belief that her followers were responding well to the tiger content, and they could reach more people by showing more authentic interactions with the animals. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with males weighing up to 660 pounds and possessing a bite force of over 1,000 pounds per square inch. Their canine teeth can grow up to 3 inches long, perfectly designed for puncturing the thick hide of large prey, while their retractable claws can extend up to 4 inches and are sharp enough to tear through muscle and bone with ease. Despite their beauty and apparent calm in captivity, tigers retain all the instincts of apex predators. Stephanie suggested working in the secondary area that day, referring to the space where food was prepared, separated from Raja's primary habitat by reinforced barriers. She proposed filming educational content about feeding protocols and tiger nutrition, emphasizing that it wouldn't be different from what they had done before. David hesitated. The secondary area was technically safe. It had been designed for exactly this kind of educational work, with multiple barriers between humans and the tiger. Stephanie had worked in that space before without incident, and her educational content had genuinely helped people understand the complexities of tiger care and conservation. Against his better judgment, influenced by Stephanie's track record and genuine expertise, David agreed to allow her into the secondary enclosure area. It was a decision based on trust built over months of successful collaboration, but it failed to account for the subtle changes in Raja's behavior. Stephanie entered the secondary area with her camera equipment, genuinely excited about creating content that would help people understand the daily realities of caring for a tiger in captivity. Raja watched her movements with what appeared to be his usual calm interest, showing no obvious signs of agitation. She began explaining to her camera about the meal preparation area, describing how much planning went into feeding a tiger properly, and educating viewers about the complexities involved in proper tiger nutrition and care. Raja's amber eyes tracked her movements with the calculated gaze that marked him as an apex predator. Tigers are solitary animals with an acute sense of territory, and subtle changes in their environment or routine can trigger responses that even experienced handlers don't always anticipate. The fatal moment came when Stephanie, focused on her educational presentation, moved closer to the primary barrier than she had ever done before. She wasn't being reckless. She was simply trying to get a better camera angle to show the feeding setup. But to Raja, Her proximity to his primary territory during his afternoon rest period triggered instincts that have been suppressed but never eliminated by years in captivity. The tiger's response was instantaneous. His massive paw struck through the barrier with lightning speed, his claws extending to their full length as he grabbed Stephanie's arm. The attack triggered every alarm system in the facility as David activated emergency protocols. But Raja's size and power made immediate intervention extremely difficult. By the time they managed to secure Raja and reach Stephanie, she had sustained injuries that proved fatal, despite immediate medical attention and rapid transport to a trauma center. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes, but it demonstrated the awesome power of an apex predator whose wild instincts remained unchanged despite years of careful handling. Stephanie's death became the catalyst for the most comprehensive federal investigation of exotic animal facilities in U.S. history. David faced federal charges for operating without proper permits and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The facility was permanently closed, and all animals were relocated to accredited sanctuaries. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.